Welcome, my name's Sam and this is The Little Greenhouse Creates. Thank you for joining me today. We are on our final card for this week's stamp set of the week, Trusty Tools, and we're going for a funky fold. So it might initially look like it's not a funky fold because it opens and closes like a normal thing, but when you open it, it does have a pop-out center. So when it stands like that. So these two come out, and then you've got these little details here. So I think that's quite a good card to end on for this week. So let's put that aside and I will bring in the supplies. There are a few supplies here, so we will focus mainly on the supplies, and the decoration I have already put together. So the first thing we've got is a piece of cherry cobbler. Now this measures 4 inches by 11 and I've scored it at 5.5. We have a strip of grey. This is Pebble Path because it's what I had left, but obviously you could use any grey. It's 1 inch by 10, which we'll score that in a moment. And then we have lots of other pieces. So we have a piece of designer series paper. I have used what I've got left of the paper I had previously, but you can use any papers. This measures 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. And that will sit over the top like so. Then we have a piece of white, identical in size, so 3 3/4 by 5 1/4, and that becomes the back panel for you to write your message. We have, excuse me, 4 pieces of coordinating designer series paper, each measuring 2 1/4 by 2 1/4, and there's 4 of those. I've then got 4 pieces of basic grey. These measure 2 by 2 inches, 4 of those. And then I have a white piece which measures 1 7/8 by 1 7/8. That is for a sentiment. This is for the sentiment on the front. This is 3 1/4 by 1 5/8. And then I have this piece of cardstock. It literally measures, it is 2.5 by 3 3/4, and it's so that I can fit a panel over the front of it, because I then will cut it down. Okay, now let's have a show you. So that, and you'll also need scraps of coloured card. Now this is obviously up to you what colours you use. I'll go through mine with you in a second. So this piece is for this piece of metal. It gives you the pinboard effect. You run it through the cut and emboss machine and it comes out looking like that. Okay. And if you want to, you could cut it down slightly, but I think I'm quite happy with that, so that's fine. So that's the grid pattern from the dies. I did say we were focusing on the dies today. Okay, now I've also got, there's a drill. So you get 2 pieces for the drill. You get the actual base and then you actually get the drill piece. And they cut out like, I've done these in cherry cobbler. So this is the red. And I have used some acetate that I've got left over. I checked the catalogue so I'll need to get myself some, but they do have silver shiny paper. So that would be another idea, or you could just use grey. So those two work like that. Then, excuse me, there is a spanner, which isn't in the actual stamp set, so this is an added extra. And the spanner comes out like that. Again, I've cut it on the acetate. Right, so there is a tape measure. Now the tape measure is a stamp, which looks like this. I have stamped it on Daffodil Delight. I've then put this around the edge and cut it out. So that gives me the edging to look like that. However, there are added extras. So you get this little 2-piece, and it gives you, when you run it through, it gives you a circle, which is for the center of the tape measure. It goes just in there. It then gives you also this other piece, which is the metal that you put on the tape measure to pull down to stop the tape measure coming out any further. And then last but by means any least, you get this little tiny die. So there's lots of tiny dies. This little tiny die cuts out the ruler section of the tape measure. Okay, and then that goes over there. We'll glue those down in a second. I've also got, so it gives you some screws and some bolts. I've done those in black. And then I've got these. Now let me show you this, because it did confuse me to begin with. You get these two pieces. You get 2 blades and 2 handles. Okay, and this is to create the pliers. So you cut them out and they come out and they look. So there's your blades and there's your handles. And I have to say, it did take me a couple of minutes to work out how they went. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some glue dots for most of this, and for quickness really. On my other card I actually used glue, but I think the glue dots might be better. So I'm going to pop my glue dot down there, like so. This then crosses over. Let me pick this up so I can show you. This crosses over, so it gives you that effect. Okay, so it looks like you're opening and closing it. I suppose if you've got any what do they call them, like tacks or braids, you can pop them through. You could actually open and close them if you wanted to. And then you've got 2 handles. Now the handles actually point away from each other, like so. And again, I'm going to use glue dots for that. So I'm just going to fold that one over. I know we normally work on the front piece, but we're going to do this. It makes life so much easier. So I'm going to pop that onto there. And then that will go over the top, like so. And then we're going to do exactly the same with the other one. Normally I would have prepared these, but I wanted to show you how they all came together. So that goes over there, like so. So there is your handle. So there's your pliers. Now we can do our drill. So I'm just going to put a glue dot onto this section here. Put it down flat. And then you can add your drill bit over the top. Okay, and that works that way. So there's your drill bit. And then obviously you don't need any for that, but then we've got our tape measure, which you do need. So that's going to go on the front and then just straight in the middle. I'm going to fold a glue dot in half, she says. Whoops. That will go down the tape measure, and then that will go over the top, like so. And then you've got the little glue dot that will go on to this. So again, I'm going to fold that over, pop it on there, and then that can sit on there like that. Hopefully my glue stays in. Right, I'm going to bring that up so hopefully you can see this. Hopefully that is in focus. So yeah, so you can see all the little detail there. And then obviously you've got the detail for the pliers here. Now the only thing that I'm going to add to this is I'm going to get my bling box, which is just at the back of me. I have got some black dots, gems, which I've had ages, so you could use whatever you wanted to. And I'm just going to put that in the center. A, that makes the actual pliers pop, but B, it also is acting like the screw that would be in the pliers. Right, so we have created our implements. Let's create the card. So the first thing we need to do is our 1-inch strip. We need to bring our trimmer in, or our scorer, and we're going to make the first score is at 2.5 inches. Okay, then we're going to move it along to 5 inches. Now you could move it along to 7 2.5 inches, but I'm just actually going to turn it round and score it again at 2.5. Let's make sure that's in place. Okay. So let me reiterate that. I have got a score at 2.5, 5 and 7.5. I've just noticed one other thing that I managed to drop on the floor. With my stamps, I stamped out a pencil and I just coloured it in. Now I've coloured it in, these are the colours. Let's have a quick look. So I've got light grey granite, which would be the edge of the pen. I've got the skin tone 500 for the middle, and then I've got light peach pie as the colour of the pencil. Right, so that's another added bonus to go over there. So let's grab everything else. So I'm going to do the inside first, just to make life easier. So what you want to do is you're going to fold this so it gives you this section. So the middle fold is up, and then you're going to fold up and up. Okay, so it will give you like a double W shape. No, it's an M shape really, isn't it? If it's a W shape, it's the wrong way. So it needs to be an M shape. Okay, and then what you can do is you put glue on either side of this piece of paper. Thank you very much. And then on the other side. And what you're aiming to do is to get the middle crease, this middle crease, directly over this middle crease here. So what I generally do, work it out. I think I'm happy with the positioning then. If you want it poking out further, or you can always do it a little bit further apart. So the main thing is to make sure it doesn't poke out of the card when it is closed. Okay, so let's do that a little bit there. Okay, so when it's closed, it doesn't poke out, which it doesn't, so that's good. And then those pieces will poke out quite well. Right, so that's how that mechanism works. So let's now put on our designer series paper on the front. I'm just going to glue that. That will go straight down. Now you've got two options with the pegboard. What you need to do is you can either run it through on an adhesive sheet so that the sticky tape is there. But what I literally did was just run little lines of glue. Now, if you're happy with doing that, that's fine, but obviously you could use adhesive sheets. Just makes life a little easier. I'm just thinking of all those little glue dots you will have created. Right, so that now goes down onto our piece of card. Run our hands over it, just to make sure it's all glued down. Okay. So the next thing to do is to put our drill in place. So that will go on there. I'm actually going to hold that up with dimensionals. So I will put those. So I'm going to have one holding those two together where the glue dot was. I'm going to have one on the base down here. One in the middle. And one up top. Let's put it there. Okay. I carefully take the back off, she says. There we go. Perfect. And we're going to turn that over so it goes like that. Okay. Perfect. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our piece, which is the large sentiment for outside. I am using With You in Mind stamp set, the big happy birthday, and I'm going to stamp it in the pebble path. So stamp it up, check you're happy with it. Yep. And then bring it in. Right, Perfect. Hold it for a couple of seconds. There we are. Now this will lie flat and it gets popped up here. Normally I don't put things on a slant, but for this mail card, I think it works quite well. So just glue it like so. I can go up there. Hold it down for a couple of seconds. And then we've got our pencil, and that will just come along here like so. And that's just, again, a slim line of glue all the way down. Perfect. So it's almost as if the pencil is underlining the word birthday. There we go. Look at that. Right, so now we can do the inside. So this will have had enough time to stick down and stay firm now, because what you're going to do is you're going to stick over it. So I wanted to make sure that that was down solid before we added extras. So the first thing we're going to add, excuse me, is our designer series paper. I'm going to put one either side. You need to make sure that you've got like a gap at either side. I'm actually going to put glue all over this one. The other two we need to be a little bit more careful with. I'm just going to make sure that they are actually stuck down. There we go. Okay, so they don't need to move. And the same with that one. There we go. And then I'm just going to try and see if I've got that lined up straight. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And what you're going to do, I'm just going to, there we go. The next two pieces, what you want to do is you only want glue up these sections and not not at the end. So you just tiny bit of glue down so you can fill in the middle. Then what I generally do is turn it round and make sure that I'm level with the section under here, and then I know I can situate it. Okay. No, there we go, that's that one. And then we're going to turn it around and do exactly the same on the other side. So I'm going to go glue, not at the, there we go, just in the middle, like so. Bring in my designer series paper, make sure it's level with that one, and then I can stick it down. Perfect. Right, so the next thing to do now is to layer our grey over the top. I suppose you could create each of these blocks before putting them on the strip, whichever feels more comfortable to you. For me, it just was easy, but as I was just thinking, the more I think about it, maybe it would have been easier to create the 4 sections and then just added them down. Right, that's that one. And then I've got this one. In the middle. And then this last one on the other side. Turn it and glue it down. Whoa, that's a bit wobbly. Right, there we go. Now I keep turning the card around, so I need to make sure that I'm on the right side. So sentiment is next. This will go on this side here. Again, I'm using Best Wishes. Again, this is with you in mind stamp set, and I'm going to use the Pebble Path. check it. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Make sure it's straight. Now, obviously, you don't have to have a sentiment inside if you don't want to. You could make 4 instruments or tools to come out. Okay, let's do that. And then that just goes in there, and it gives you just enough space around the edges. Oh, damn. I'm going to have to do a little bit of blinging on that, I think. How annoying. Right, okay. So now we can add the instruments, or the tools, should I say. So the first one I'm going to add is my pliers. I'm just going to add it with the handle. I'm just going to run the glue down there. Okay. And that sits like so. Perfect. I'm not doing for 2 reasons. I'm not gluing this down. The glue would probably just be runny. And the second, it just gives it a bit more of a 3D effect rather than it being totally and utterly flat. So this one, she says, we're going to hope that the glue does not run too much. If it doesn't work, we will use glue dots. I'm going to pop that down there. Okay. Then I've got, let's bring all my other bits in. So I've got my tape measure. Now I think I'm going to add my tape measure on dimensionals. Let's have that standing out, shall we? Popping out on there, on there. Take those off. Obviously, when you add dimensionals with this kind of card, be careful because you don't want it to be too thick. A, it will become very expensive for posting, and B, you won't be able to close the card. Right, so there's my tape measure. Yep, I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to add these 2 little last pieces. I think I might add them over on this side. So a tiny bit of glue. Just a tiny, tiny tab of glue there. Pop my bolt on there. Hold it for a second. And then I'm going to do exactly the same. Actually, I might be able to do it easier on this way. There we go. Don't want too much glue, she says. Now, as I said, I've made a little hiccup there. So it's never a hiccup. It is a creative opportunity. So I'm going to use my little bits of mail bling that I've got here just to add. So I might just stick with the grey. So that can go there. There. And then I'm going to use a dot that goes, oops, hello. It goes over here. Now I'm lucky with this because they've got different shapes, but you can use whatever bling you've got that would make life easy. There we go. And that just covers up my little hiccup and just gives me a creative opportunity to add some bling, because you don't normally add bling to a man's card, but why not? So, oh, hello, we've forgotten the back. So that is simple as just gluing it down, really. I'm just going to run myself, come on, glue. There we go. Okay. And over. And that will just simply sit down there, on there. So there is our card for today. Our last card for this stamp set for this time round. So thank you ever so much for joining me today. I'll be back on Monday with a new stamp set, so do join me then. I hope you enjoyed this funky fold. If you have a go, please put comments or photographs in the bottom. I would love to see, that would be brilliant. But whatever you do for the rest of the weekend, have a lovely weekend, and I hope to catch up with you soon. Bye.